Welcome to the Make Your Brain Happy podcast, hosted by Veronique Cardone, MS, the podcast where you'll learn how to live your life to its fullest potential. This is for anyone who's interested in the science of the brain or wants to seize the power of positive thinking, enhanced mental performance, and a healthy lifestyle.
Hello, and welcome to the Make Your Brain Happy podcast with Veronique. Today, I'm extremely excited to have Sara McDermott Jain as my guest. I've known Sara for a while. Our lives have crossed, and I'm extremely proud and excited to have her on the show today because, you know, Sara, you are like one of my daughters, and not really, and you are such an accomplished and talented person. You know, to say you a few things about Sara, Sara is an award-winning producer, screenwriter, and published author. And we are going to talk today about her book, you know, Wolves at Night, but much more than that. And you're also the creator of the book to script course, right? Because you can also help authors get their books into scripts and get into like mega films, and maybe yours will become one. But welcome to the show. And I just would like always to start. I always start by asking, you know, tell us something about yourself. You know, who are you? What have you accomplished? What's your background? And what's exciting about yourself?
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And first, let me just say thanks so much for having me on the podcast. So it's amazing to be here with you. You are my longtime mentor, and have been just such an important person in my life. So thank you so much. I got tears in my eyes from the introduction. So to tell you a little bit about me, so I am a writer. So I mean, I'm very much identified with that as part of who I am, and it's always been the case really since I was young. So I sometimes tell the story. When we were little, we would in the summertime rent like a small beach house with a whole bunch of our relatives. So it was like a 3-bedroom beach house with like 12 people there, one TV, way before there was internet and these other things. We didn't have video games or any of that. So in the afternoons, the adults would kind of put the kids on the porch with notebooks and pens. And that was really our entertainment that we would write. Like, so we would put together sometimes little skits, or we would write little stories, chapters, and read them to each other. So I think the love of writing started very early on. So I pretty much always knew that was my passion. Once I got to high school, I very much knew, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a novelist. Went to school, of course. I went to college, English major, undergrad, and then went to graduate school for publishing and writing. So again, I knew I kind of wanted to be in the world of books, but then my life took a little bit of a writing turn, because while I was in graduate school, I actually took a screenwriting course while I was there. And eventually, so not overnight, but I wound up selling the screenplay that I wrote in that course. Was the first official full-length screenplay I ever sold. So I was very much then even more so bitten by this bug of, wanting to write, got very involved in the world of screenwriting. And really for the past 15 years, I've worked in screenwriting in some way or another. So doing a lot of freelance script writing, sometimes selling original content, more often being hired by production companies to revise scripts, be like a script doctor before they go into production, sometimes being hired to write something from someone else's idea. And then, as you mentioned, I also coach other writers. So I coach authors, on how to adapt their books into screenplays, because I do have this background in both publishing, working with books, and also screenwriting. And I was finding that there really wasn't a whole lot out there to specifically talk about the adaptation process. There's a whole lot on just screenwriting in general, but I really wanted to create something that would more thoroughly walk people through, okay, you have this like 500-page book, how do you make it a 100-page screenplay? And here's how you do that. So this past year especially, so I launched that course, I guess, a little over a year ago. I've been doing that as well and coaching authors and working with them, which has also been a really amazing experience.
Okay. So we all know by now that you're passionate about writing.
Yes, no question.
So my question to you is, what drove you to write that? So tell us a little bit about that book first, so people understand what the story is. Wolves at Night.
Yes, absolutely.
But then I want to know what drove you to write this kind. It's a thriller. Mm-hmm. It's also the story of the psychological evolution and liberation of a woman. Yes. Who was more like in an abusive situation, and she finally takes care of her life, right? Yes. Mm-hmm. So what drove you to write that story?
Well, one thing I'll say first is in terms of it being, so it is a thriller story. It's it can be an intense story for some people. There's scary sections, a lot of scary sections. These kind of stories have always really resonated with me, just because I have always really been interested and fascinated with how they take the fears in our everyday lives. And it's really just, they put them into metaphors. So they're usually, these metaphorical obstacles in the book that have to be overcome, but it's similar to the process we go through in real life when we have some kind of fear we have to face or something that we have to overcome. So in terms of thriller and horror stories, because sometimes people are surprised and they're like, "You're so sweet, so why are you writing, like these scary stories?" But that's really what I love about it, is just that those stories tend to have many layers of symbolism, walking us through a psychological process, like you said. So from screenwriting, my screenwriting background served me really well, because there's very specific structuring and like hero's journey and all that stuff, which people are probably a little familiar with. And it's developed over, thousands of years or who knows how long, but for a reason, because it really does mimic the psychological process someone has to go through to have a breakthrough. With this book,
in a nutshell, what's the story? Yes. Without telling without sharing the end, but in a nutshell, yeah.
So in a nutshell, we have our main character, Eleni, and she ventures to a remote, off-the-grid cabin in the Alaskan wilderness. She has her 2-year-old son with her. And the reason she has gone is because her son's father, Ben, has gotten a message to her to meet him there. So Ben has actually been on the run from the law since she was pregnant. So he's never actually met the little boy. He's wanted for murder. So there is a bit of a murder mystery tied in. And she is kind of trying to convince herself that he's innocent. So she's grappling with a whole lot of things. And of course, she doesn't want to believe that this person who fathered her child maybe really did these things. So she's maybe trying to convince herself he's innocent, has been telling people she believes he's innocent. So she goes thinking she'll see him in the hopes that, this will be confirmed. And also just in the hopes of experiencing, like a feeling of love or validation. So she's somebody who's very much just isolated in her life. She really doesn't have anyone. Her family has really turned their backs on her. She doesn't have any close friends. It's really just been her and this little boy. So she's been very isolated. So she goes, it's obviously not a great idea. So it is in Alaska. There are wild animals to contend with. This is an off the grid cabin. It's not fantastically, secure. And then throughout the course of the story, what also winds up happening is criminals that, her former lover is involved with or was involved with, come looking for him. So they have also found out that he's supposed to be there at this cabin. They come looking for him, but instead find her and her 2-year-old. So about, as vulnerable as they could possibly get. So they're going to have to contend with them. They're going to have to contend with the animals. And then eventually, of course, if and when Ben shows up, they're going to have to contend with him as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So my question is, first of all, sometimes I wanted to slap her because then why are you doing those stupid things? But like going back to what we call the relationship with Ben, why would a woman with a 2-year-old put herself in such a situation? Like what's going on in that relationship?
Yes, I know it can definitely be a frustrating thing to read about. So this is so a big part of the story. It does also deal with the dynamics of an abusive relationship. So in the relationship up to this point, I think there's been a fair amount of brainwashing. So when she initially met him, again, she's someone who's isolated. She's not super close with anyone else. She hasn't had other really strong relationships that she can compare this to or draw any kind of knowledge from. So very much on her own. And all of a sudden, it's like she has this person giving her all this attention and really pressuring her and telling her, what love is. And again, she has no like real point of reference, like what is love, like besides maybe what she's seen on TV. So she's hearing, we have to be a total team and you have to support me no matter what. And that's what love really is. And it's been kind of pounded into her to the point, we get some flashbacks in the book. So like to the point where very isolated, even from coworkers, even from talking to anybody about him, just because she's had it so drilled into her that her loyalty is to him and that she's really not supposed to share information with other people or reach out to other people. So when she does make this decision to go, I do think on one level, she doesn't quite realize how dangerous this is going to be. So she has been in Alaska before, during the summer working as a tour guide, but definitely not, in this cabin totally by herself with, the wolves out. So there's literal wolves and there's also metaphorical wolves. She hasn't quite been in that situation. So I think on one level, she's thinking it's not going to be quite as dangerous as it does work out to be. I think on the other level, there's a great deal of pressure to show that loyalty to him that's been drilled into her, that it's so important and you have to be loyal. So for her not to show up when he's like gotten this message to her and wants to see his son for the first time, and maybe this is the only time he'll be able to see his son because he's going to have to go on the run again, right after this. For her not to go, it's been really burrowed into her brain that would just be such a betrayal, and showing herself, not to be worthy of what he has convinced her is love. Even though we understand as we're reading it that it's really not real love.
But is there anything in your life that you can share that has kind of guided or inspired you in this story?
Absolutely. So there's things, I guess, on a more superficial level and then on a deeper level. So on a more superficial level, I have spent time in Alaska. So I lived there for a summer for a writing job. So I just fell in love with the landscape. I learned a lot about the animals. The whole adventure of it, the fact that there is kind of a danger element there, was just really fascinating. So I knew I kind of wanted to put that into a story. And then on the more personal level, I think two things really. So one is that I have a small son. So my son is now 7, but when I first had the idea for this story, he was 2. So he was the age of the little boy in the book. And at the time, I definitely, different things going on. But at the time, I would just imagine these different scenarios, like being an imaginative person already and a writer, my imagination would kind of run wild. And I'd be like, what if we were in this situation? What if we were in that situation? What would I do? How would I protect my kid? So I think the initial idea kind of came from that and kind of picturing, different things that could happen. In addition to that, so I have had some experience in my life with abusive relationships. And I think for me, it was really important to try and show this process of somebody winding up in what comes to be a life or death situation, but from beginnings that at first seem, innocent or even loving. So I wanted to kind of show how that can happen, that someone can wind up in this situation almost without even knowing what happened. So people watching from the outside can maybe see what's wrong, but a lot of times when people are in these relationships, you really don't see it until it reaches, an extreme place. And that's because there is
it's your new norm. It's like you have a norm and then you don't understand there is another one. That's what you say.
Yes. So you have your own norm, and whatever does come up, whatever does happen. So there's, again, in the flashbacks, there's a couple things that happen early on in their relationship that maybe alert her that maybe something's not right. But the other person, always has what seems like kind of a rational explanation, or they can kind of talk around it. And you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. But then the more you do that, the deeper in you are. So yeah, I definitely think it just becomes normalized, and then the boundaries just keep getting pushed.
So, I have 2 other questions, but one is like following this theme. What is your advice to women or to people like really trying to leave an abusive situation?
Yes, definitely.
Which is what she will do at the end. It's a book, but in a very dramatic manner.
Very dramatic fashion. So these scary stories get to take things and put them to an extreme sometimes. For anyone, who is in that situation, I would say first and foremost, you're going to need some kind of support network. So it's very difficult, I think, for people to completely see what's going on their own and also just trust themselves. Because at that point with emotional abuse, again, it's kind of a brainwashing process. So you might not trust what you're feeling. So like you might feel like, okay, I don't think this is right. But then your partner will tell you, no, it is right. And you're the one that's crazy, or you're the one, that's wrong, or you're the one that's terrible. So, some people might have people in their lives that they're already close with that they feel they could go to. But if you don't have that, like I strongly encourage people to reach out. There's the, the National Domestic Abuse Hotline, and, most areas I think hopefully have, some kind of resources. I know, so I met Veronique when I was living in Princeton, and there was Woman Space, which was a women's counseling center, which had all sorts of resources for people in these situations. And I think even just being able to go talk to a counselor saying, this is what I'm experiencing, even if you don't yet fully believe that it's abuse, because again, you might not recognize it, to have somebody who's trained in it that can explain it to you, kind of what's happening, this process, because you feel something is wrong, but that can give you a lot of validation and help you build a plan for how to go from there.
Thank you so much. So obviously you are strong, independent, very successful woman. So, how do you become strong and resilient? Is this something that you are by nature, or do you believe that this is something like a muscle that you can build?
I do think it's something that you can build, because I definitely feel a lot stronger today than I think I would have felt 5 years ago, than I probably would have felt, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So I think it's something that builds over time. I think there's lots of things that can contribute. So again, having support network, friends, family, people like you, my family is amazingly supportive. That can really help as well, building you up. I think one other thing that I'll mention for me that I just think throughout my whole life has been helpful is the writing. So we talked at the beginning about having a passion writing. So if you have a passion, or someone listening to this, if you're in some kind of situation, one thing that has really helped me is being able to hone in on something that I love and I am passionate about, because it can give you a purpose. So if you're in this situation where things just seem really helpless or just impossible, like how am I going to move forward? Or maybe you're in a situation where you realize like, hey, I have to get a divorce, but maybe you've been married, 20 years, like maybe just the thought of that, you have no idea what your life is going to be. For me, it's been really helpful. And I think for anyone would be helpful, find something that you love, or even if at this point you can't quite conceive of like, what would I love? If there's something that interests you, something that's for you that you can hone in on, and just give yourself a little time to explore that. Again, that can just give you a sense of purpose and a sense of fulfillment. And it might start really small. But as you get your life back on track, it's something that you can focus on and build on, and draw strength from, because then you have something, something else that you care about too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true that, when I was at my lowest, from a mental health perspective, what helped me was to focus on my passions.
Yes.
And because that gave me a boost of serotonin and nice little endorphins, because it was something I liked to do. Yeah. And then as you do it, you also start to see that, I wrote a book. I got my degree in nutrition, I started to run 6 miles a day. And then it really boosts your self-confidence. Are you planning to write other books? And is there like a theme you're going to follow, or it's all over the place?
Oh my goodness, that's the big question right now. So I definitely am planning to write other books. I have a ton of ideas. So for me, it's really just choosing which one is going to be next. Probably 2 or 3 of those ideas also deal with some themes of abuse. So different stories, but still kind of have those themes there. So the question for me is kind of, do I want to sort of write that story again with different circumstances, or will I do a totally different story. A lot of the ideas I get are all under that thriller horror kind of blanket. So most likely it'll be a scary kind of story. But
so it's going to be scary again with some adventure and like you're going to see what's going to happen, right? You're going to keep it very suspenseful.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I enjoy those suspenseful stories, and I enjoy stories with just with a lot of atmosphere. So like you reading this book, it's the cabin, it's Alaska, it's very like atmospheric. So I like picking unique settings and kind of really exploring that as well.
You could really feel the isolation in that book.
Yeah.
And he's like, what is she going to do? Because if she goes out, there are wolves, and she's too far away from even the small city that is close to the cabin, and not even a car can drive. So, yeah. It would be very scary. I've been in Alaska, but not during the winter, but I've seen enough shows to be a little bit scared. Yes. So let's go to your, script, script writing experience. So is this going to become a movie? Because it's perfect. And do you have the movie in mind? Because I wrote 2 books, right? But they are like educational book. They are not adventures. But do you have a vision when you write the book that you see the movie, or it comes after an afterthought?
My screenwriting background serves me very well, just because I've had it so ingrained in me to write my stories according to a certain structure. So screenplays have a very certain structure. It's designed for a reason. Again, it's like psychology, but it just works really well in terms of storytelling. So when I went to do the book, I was able to just carry that over and basically build my book the same way I would build a screenplay. Of course, in the book, you can just put in a lot more details, description, like all those things that you can't include in the screenplay. But that basic like skeleton, I was able to use. So I'm definitely hoping it's going to become a film as well. So I am working with a manager. So we're going to be, sharing the book around. I'm going to very soon start to do the screenplay version. And, so fingers crossed. But yes, hopefully someday we'll be seeing it on the big screen. I have a very clear vision of like exactly kind of what I would want in the trailer and all that good stuff. So I'm hoping it comes together. And in terms of your education books, all I'll say very quickly is from my the coaching side of me is there definitely have been educational books that have been adapted to screenplays as well. Oh. So there have been. So it's really just a matter of kind of fictionalizing it. So some famous ones are, I think, What to Expect When You're Expecting was turned into a film.
An educational film, not a thriller or a...
Well, this was a rom-com, I think. So I think they made it a rom-com. He's Just Not That Into You was like a dating guy. Yes, they made that. And also one that a lot of people are surprised to learn, Mean Girls. I don't know, the high school.
Yeah, of course I know, yeah.
That was actually based on a book called Queen Bees and Wannabes that was about like the psychology of teenage girls, but they just kind of fictionalized it. They just took the information in the book and translated it into characters. And so it is possible. It might take a little more work, but it's possible.
Very interesting. I mean, I did not know this, but it's very smart, right? Because by going to those books, you have all the fundamentals or what's going to be the basic personality of each person in the movie.
Yes.
That's what you're saying, right?
Yes. Yeah. That's, and then you can kind of build from there. So then you just develop, okay, this character is going to show that mindset and this character will show this other mindset. And, here's how they're going to bounce off.
In a way, you're telling me that any book can be transformed into a script.
It can. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, but there must be some ingredients. There must be some ingredients that have to be in the recipe, right? Mm-hmm. Are there any secret recipes that you can share?
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, the big one really is learning the screenplay structure, like I said. So I always use 3-act structure. There are other types of structures, but that one for me personally just works the best. So when people are first starting to try and outline, do a story, I usually say learn like the 9 beats of the structure and then just try to start thinking, okay, what naturally would fit each of these beats going by that structure. Some other things to keep in mind. So designing characters is also really important. So sort of magic formula for that. And in terms of an educational book, might actually be, easier than with other books in terms of figuring it out, but you really want to nail down like a certain number of traits that those characters have.
Yes.
And I would say don't go above 5, because, you know, real people in real life, we can be complicated. We can have all different traits, but with a character, if it gets too many traits, it just gets confusing. So really just nail down, you know, a certain number of traits, less than 5. And then you want to be designing your characters so that those traits are going to work off each other a certain way. So just like in real life, you know, if people have traits that are complementary, they're probably going to be friends, or they're going to develop a relationship. If they have traits that repel them, there's going to be friction and there's going to be conflict. So that's all stuff that you can design for your.
You establish the relationships as well. Oh yeah, that's interesting to know, because I guess it's important as you write a book also, right? You know, to help people understand who that person is or where the story is going. If you go in every way, or if it's too many anecdotes, or you have to follow a theme when you write a book.
Yes. You don't want it to be too diluted in terms of the way they speak. So like with nailing down those traits, what's really helpful is, you know, every line, like in a screenplay, and it can be for the book as well, every line of dialogue, everything they say should represent their traits in some way, which, you know, it's a neat trick to kind of get a hold on. But when you do, that character becomes very clearly drawn. If it's like every line, say they have 5 traits, but every line relates to one or more of those traits, doesn't have to do all 5 at once, but is going to cover one of those. It helps you just building that character and making them more like a real person.
Okay. Well, you know, we are getting at the 45-minute interview mark. So any closing words and of course your self-promotion moment that I want to give you, of course, whatever you can share with us about your book, where to find it, your website, whatever.
Absolutely. So before I kind of share about me, I'll shout out 2 quick organizations that I know are in your area. So I already mentioned Woman Space in that Princeton, New Jersey area. I also really want to mention Dress for Success as an amazing organization that also helps women getting back on their feet with, you know, different classes, with getting them, you know, proper clothing for interviews, all that stuff. So I really just wanted to mention both of them as just being marvelously supportive. You know,
I concur. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. So in terms of me, so definitely anybody, you know, who likes their thrillers, make sure you get Wolves at Night and check it out. You can find it on Amazon. It actually hit a couple different Amazon bestseller lists.
Yeah, tell us what bestseller list.
Yes, so it's been. So I think the first one it hit was just the straight horror list, and that was up in Canada, which was super exciting. So it was. I remember taking a screenshot. It was like 3 spaces ahead of Dean Koontz's book, and I was really excited because I was, you know, for that afternoon, and then it. Yeah. But I was super excited. So that was just the straight horror list. It also in the U.S. wound up landing for hottest new release and animal fiction, and now American horror. So it's been on and off the American horror almost weekly. Like it'll be on for a couple days, maybe off a couple days, but then it'll be back on. So it's been doing really good. So yeah, you can definitely find it on Amazon. It's at Barnes and Noble, certain indie bookstores, depending on, you know, where you're located. I think if they don't have it, they can always order it in, but yeah, so you can check out your bookstore or just check out Amazon. That would be great. I would love to connect.
Your website.
Yes. So my website is just saramcdermottjan.com. So Sara without an H. Just Sara, McDermott, and Jain is actually JAIN.com. So I'm in the process of building out, you know, a bigger website. So right now we've got a landing page. So depending on when you go and check it, maybe the whole big website will be up, but putting a lot of different fun things in there and extra goodies. And
that's where you go if you want to work with you on script writing.
So you can definitely go there to sign up, to send me a message. You can also find information at Book to Script Course. So booktoscriptcourse.com is the sales page for the actual course. And you can also find me on Facebook. So just search Sara McDermott Jain, One Scary Woman.
Okay, One Scary Woman. You're not a scary woman, but we all remember this. One Scary Woman. Well, it was a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
Good luck. Congratulations for the success of your book. Thank you for your talent and sharing your story, and good luck for the future. I'm looking forward to be reading more books and hopefully to watch your movies in the future. Thank you, Sara.
Veronique, thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the Make Your Brain Happy podcast. This episode was recorded by Veronique Cardone and produced by HG Media. If you enjoy our podcast, please share it with your friends. You can find our podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever you listen to podcasts.